Airbnb was born by solving a problem. In 2008, my roommate Brian and I quit our jobs to become entrepreneurs, and the rent on our apartment went up. And suddenly, we had a big problem. We had to figure out, in a matter of days, how to make some extra money to save our apartment. And it just so happened that coming weekend, a design conference was coming to San Francisco that was so big, all of the hotel rooms had sold out in the city, and designers didn't have a place to stay. So we started to connect the dots, which is what I think designers do, is you start to connect dots that aren't immediately obvious. And we said, well, people need a place to stay, and we have all this extra space in our apartment. What if we were to rent that out to designers? And thus was born Airbnb. Design has been with us from the beginning. It's in our DNA. It's in everything that we do. The thing about design is that I think there's a misconception that design is about the way things look, about the aesthetic of something, about the surface. Design, from our perspective, is a much more holistic view of things. It's not just the way things look, it's the way things work. It's the why things are the way they are. And so at Airbnb, design has a holistic role at the company. It's not just about how the website looks, but it's about the way that the Android app or the iPhone app interacts with you when you check into an apartment. It's about the way that our office is designed, even just the physical space of which we work inside. So design for us has been a part of the company since the beginning, and it matriculates throughout everything that we do. How can design drive innovation in a company? I think that design thinking in a company, if there's one thing that you could do to help inspire design-driven thinking, it would be to find opportunities for empathy. So what do I mean by that? Whatever you're selling, your service or product to an end customer, the closer you can get to them so that you can empathize with how they're using your product, the pain that they're feeling with the existing solution, the better informed you'll be to design a solution for them. So let me tell you a story. Back in 2009, we recognized a problem. The photos on Airbnb were not very good photos, and they're incredibly important. So we decided to go solve this problem ourselves. And we actually, in the early days of the company, would go out city by city, photographing the apartments and the listings on Airbnb for free for hosts. And in the process of doing this, we got to know our early adopters. And we began to talk with them in depth about what they were feeling when they used our service. And we began to empathize with them. So we began to understand from a very deep perspective what problems they were facing, which then guided us to design solutions for them. So that's one way that we used empathy. The other is that we constantly use the product. So even right now during DLD, I'm staying on a beautiful Airbnb apartment not too far from the conference. And everywhere we go, we stay using the service. And what that does is it allows us to empathize. By booking places, by hosting. In San Francisco, I've hosted about 175 people. And by both traveling and hosting it gives us a sense of how to empathize with a host and a guest so that we can design better products for them. So I think if a company wants to bring in design-based thinking, find ways to empathize and put yourself in the shoes of the customer you're designing for. Travel is such an international activity, and sharing is also a universal concept. So it's kind of like the marriage of those two worlds, sharing and international travel. And the cool thing about Airbnb is that it has this inherent network effect. So as you travel to a city, you return to where you came from, say back to Munich, and guests are inspired to share their listing or create a listing to share their space. And it's because of the international travel that people from Munich go to New York, people from New York go to Miami, people from Miami go to Los Angeles, and there's all of this interconnectedness between all these cities around the world. There's probably an analogy back to when the Roman Empire was building their roads throughout Europe. They created all these fascinating connections between cities that never before in the history of the planet had been connected. And it was because of that that trade routes began. It's because of that ideas spread, including religions and things like architecture and art. And so, one of the cool things about Airbnb is that we've now interconnected these routes and allowed people to go to places they otherwise maybe didn't have access to. Parts of cities, neighborhoods that don't have traditional accommodations. And so we like to think that we're connecting people to places that they didn't previously have access to.
Sounds great.
Yeah,
I'm impressed.
well, and that's the cool thing about the sharing economy, is that it's giving people access to things. All right, it's becoming less about ownership and more about having access. So, you don't necessarily need a second home anymore. You now have access to hundreds of thousands of them all over the world.